Hey guys, Cory Allen within the spread. I was going to talk to you about products, and I'm not a big product guy, so to speak, obviously. But there are times and places, and I like having one of those completionists. I like having a complete set. I like working with companies, doing things, buying things. As far as terminal tackle goes, they kind of fit together. Like, I like one-stop shopping. So like if I go with a rod brand, if I go with a certain line, baits are a little bit different because there's so many different flavors, but especially terminal tackle like this, I'm a little bit selective, and I really like to kind of have one brand that I go with. Everybody's got their own particulars, but I'll tell you what, about 5 years ago, a company sent me a prototype rod, and I loved it. And to this day, it was still my favorite rod, and I said that to a lot of people. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, for a long time, they made the prototype. I caught a lot of big fish on it. We caught like some 50, 52 inches on it, trolling, casting, everything. There wasn't anything I could find that I couldn't do with it that I didn't like, that was within the parameters of a heavy musky stick. And I'll tell you what it was. It was a 9-foot Fenwick extra heavy Elite Tech Predator. And the sad thing was, like, for whatever reason, they wouldn't make the rods that long for a while. I even begged and pleaded. I was like, this is an amazing rod. I love this rod. But they didn't. But guess what? 5 years later, ta-da! Guess what they did? And I was pretty excited about this because I was always a big fan of the Fenwick line. They're a really no-nonsense company. The cool thing about them is they don't advertise quite as much. They don't really have to. They've got like a cult following with a lot of people, and that's for a good reason, because they've been one of the first companies, I think maybe the first company to make graphite rods of any quality. And I'll tell you what, I won't just like say, well, you know, I like this rod because. I'm going to tell you why. Because it's got this. Here's one. I got really sick and tired of the fact that so many times when I buy an expensive rod, one of the parts that gets the most wear and tear and the most use is the handle. And so often, most rods, even high-end rods, it doesn't matter what quality cork you have, it's still cork. And I know some people like that feel. Cork would wear away. I mean, there's a lot of rods that I have where I would slip them into rod holders, you know, suddenly to do a trolling pass, run them the prop wash. I don't like having 15-20 rod. I don't want to have like just a trolling setup and a casting setup. I'll mix and match. I'll use them for a lot of the same stuff. But those cork rods, like, they would wear away through those, and it would go all the way to the blank within a couple trips if I had them in a rod holder and I was putting any kind of duress on it, any kind of speed or heavy crankbait. This stuff is called tack. It is a compressed cork composite, and this stuff is incredibly comfortable. The other cool thing about it too is it's incredibly durable. And so, like, this is one rod. I've had this out here for about 2 months. I've been running it in the rod holder pretty hard, as well as fishing. And you can tell, you can't even see where this has even been in the rod holder. Like, a lot of my other rods, I won't name names, if I'd had them in that for a couple days, you'd be able to see the blank right here, where it hit the rod holders, where it was down on the prop wash. Not this one. This one is tough as nails. And that helps too, because it also stays firm in the rod holder. So when you get a strike, when you get a hit, there's no slack, there's no leeway. Like, it grips that rod, it grips the holder, and you get a really good hook set on it. But the other cool thing about this too is, a lot of times, and I've done this before, we've all done this, let's say you're fishing in the rain, you get a backlash. I've actually almost, never quite totally lost, but have almost lost rods. Fishing in the rain, do a power cast, do a sidearm, get a backlash hits, not expecting that sudden jolt of energy surging through my arm, and guess what? The rod slips out of my hand because I'm gripping on the cork. This stuff, contrary to that, actually gets an even better grip when it's wet, which is a pretty neat little deal. And as far as I know, I don't know another company that actually uses this kind of material. And I really hope they stick with it, because it's a really durable, really functional, really aesthetic material too. It doesn't get quite the stain as cork does. Like, after you use cork for, you know, a little while, just the oils from your hand and just being out in the elements and stuff, like, cork starts to really get kind of junky, trashy. Like, it just looks marred, it looks stained. It's not nearly quite as appealing. Like, I know a lot of guys will even like leave the plastic on the handle so they don't have to deal with that, but then that's also a compromise in and of itself. This stuff, it always kind of keeps its same color and texture no matter how much you use it. So I mean, aesthetics aren't everything. I think this is a really striking rod, just to say the least, but that in particular, like, this rod always seems to appear as if it's just out of the box or not been used much at all. On top of that, it's got really good stainless steel insert eyelets, so that's something too, like ceramic eyelets. I'm just gonna be honest, don't ever buy, ever, as in, like, ever buy a rod musky fishing with ceramic eyelets. And that's the voice of experience. What happens is there's not going to be a time where they don't get chipped. Something's going to happen. You know, we're hitting the side of the boat with our rods, we're doing figure eights, we're doing all this stuff, and they will get chipped. And even if it's not something big, something you can't even really notice with a naked eye, a lot of times they'll get that edge worn off of the ceramic, and you'll set the hook and all you'll get is slack sometime. I've had that happen several times. Lost big fish because of little minute chips in the eyelets that were ceramic that I didn't notice, and what the line sure did. And with that braid, it'll just slice it off. It is a textile. So that's a really, really, really good thing to consider, and that goes for every eyelet. It's not just the top end eyelet. A lot of rods, sometimes they just have the top eyelet that's like a stainless steel. It's like the entire set. Like this entire set of eyelets is insert stainless steel. That's a really fantastic thing. The other thing, to be quite honest with you, is price point. Now, I believe in paying for quality. I don't believe in paying for a name. And too often, you know, rod brands and stuff like that, like, you're paying for a name. Sometimes they coincide. There are some really, really, really top-end things that are worth every penny that you pay for them. I would have to be honest and say, I don't think that's the case with most musky rods. Now this one, hopefully it's not just one of those things where I said, hey, you should go buy this because I said so. I hope I'm giving you enough feedback on these things so that you actually realize what's so good about them. And the cool thing is, this is the 9-foot extra heavy, which is like your standard do-all musky stick. So like right here, I've been throwing pretty standard, actually a little bit heavier bait than normal. That's a Phantom Exorcist. And I'll just show you, I'll make one cast here to kind of show you what kind of torque this thing can take. The other cool thing too, the way that they make these rods with the graphite, it's got a fast action, but it's not a snappy fast action. It like loads up throughout the blank a little bit more, and I've noticed that not just in working different styles of baits, but also a lot of times what will happen is you'll lose fish if you have a really snappy graphite rod, because you want something stout, but if it's just got that snap in the tip and it doesn't load up throughout, a lot of times what will happen is when these fish do head shakes and they get that slack, it's like as soon as they give it slack, the rod just goes like this, because it's just the tip that's bending. When you've got a rod that loads up all the way through, it takes more extended force to actually pull it back. So it's bending more of the rod length itself, so whenever the fish does move, it compensates for that. It's not literally just snapping, and then the length that the rod tip is bent in the tip snaps back and forth when it gets slack every time it head shakes. What it's doing is it's actually compensating for that, because it loads up, and every time the fish head shakes, it doesn't go back to zero. It maybe goes back about 30 or 40%. So your head shakes are going to be like this, not. And that slack sounds stupid. I've lost some nice fish because of that. I've had some pretty bad days because of that. So that's a really, really, really good thing to consider with these rods. Here's the other thing to consider. They are $199.99. And I'll tell you what, I don't really know of too many musky rods, period, that are 9 feet long you can buy for under $200. The ones you can usually aren't worth $5, and the ones that cost 3 times that much, to be quite frank, I don't think have nearly the components, nearly the innovation, nearly the features, and just like I said, like there's so many things to like about this rod and the whole series. They come with a 9-foot. This is the one I use for heavy stuff. Like this, there's an 8'6", a little bit shorter one, same action. They've got an 8-foot. It's a medium heavy, which is like for a little bit lighter baits. That's one of those things that, like, if you're using lighter glide baits, something like that, I'll use it for that. Usually I bump down to a spinning rod when I'm doing really, really light presentations for muskies, but those medium heavy action rods, they come in handy for anything kind of in that gray zone of like 3/4 of an ounce to 1.25, 1.5. You can get away with it on this rod, but that rod in particular, the medium heavy 8-foot, like that's really, really, really dope for stuff like that. That's like larger bass size presentations, but not total finesse. And as you can see while I'm fishing this thing, you can really put some heft behind it. The cast's really easy. It's really light. I know that's the thing that a lot of people like to brag about. And I'll admit, like, I think a lot of people whine about the weight of a rod too much. But there have been times, and I have seen rods where actually, yeah, it's a consideration they should have taken a little bit greater, because not only is balance important, but the weight itself is. I've never seen a rod that is the best compromise of all things when it comes to weight. Like this is, I think, 8 ounces. Not that heavy, but I'll tell you this, I don't notice it when I'm throwing it. And I've thrown rods that are maybe an ounce lighter, 2 ounces lighter for the same kind of model. Like I said, they're not they're not as high quality. They're not nearly as durable. I've had those kind of rods snap. It's a little bit higher modulus graphite. And so really for the balance, it's really well balanced. But if you're looking for like that rod that's kind of the best of all things encompassed, I really don't think you can beat these, to be quite honest. Like I said, when I tested the prototype to them about 5 years ago, I was like, this is the single best rod I've ever used in my entire life. When will you be making these? And it was one of those to be continued, but the future is now, I guess. So check these things out. Fenwick Elite Tech Predator series. Like I said, they come in about 5 different models. This is the casting series. And this is one heck of a musky rod, especially for the price. 200 bucks, you know, anybody can do that. You're not gonna find any better price on a rod. But I'd say you're not gonna find any better rod for that price as well. This is Cory Allen in the spread. See you guys later.